We have our 5 games for review, and then we're going to do a review of the Kings Indian defense. Looks like some interesting material, and yeah, thank you all very much for joining. This game was sent to us by El Gecko, who's playing black, and we can so we'll take it from his position. This is a Petrov's defense: knight f3, knight f6, 3 knights, 4 knights, d4. And yeah, this is this basically is a pretty straightforward response to the Petrovs. Hey, El Gecko, you're number 1. You're the first on the list, so thank you very much for joining the stream. Let's take a look at this. Thanks for being here, and thanks for participating and contributing to the stream. But yeah, so d4 here is white's second most popular response. Pawn takes pawn, knight takes pawn, and then black has a choice of a number of different moves. The main line here is bishop to b4, followed by knight takes c6, b takes c6, bishop d3, d5. Okay, well yeah, that's a no, I think some people are here, Ahmet. Yeah, so d5, and then basically potentially attacking d4 on the next move. But overall, yeah, pretty hey, welcome everybody. But d4 is a pretty strong response to this. Black deviates with queen e7 here. Queen e7 is interesting. Let's take a look. So queen e7 basically allows for some potential threats on c7. I see that with the knight. So like d knight b5 maybe. But it also attacks this pawn on e4. The proposed responses for white are like bishop to d3, bishop to e2, bishop to g5. All of these sort of effectively defend. Basically. So in the Petrovs, frequently these e-pawns are exchanged, and right now basically white has lost his d-pawn versus his e-pawn, and basically this is and basically this is an interesting opening. Bishop to b4 is the most commonly played, but queen e7 is an idea, but not an easy one for white to capitalize on. So, there's a big difference in eval, here, 1.6, but I don't see an obvious response or an obvious way that white's going to get in. So either bishop to g5, knight b5, but it's difficult for me to see at least a superficial reason why queen e7 is so much, is so different in terms of eval than bishop to b4. Let's look at this. So d6 and bishop c5 both look reasonable. Bishop c5 I sort of like. That basically looks like a Scotch game with a few extra move transpositions. Bishop e5, bishop e3, bishop b6, knight c6, b takes, e5. And here, this is sort of a it's basically a congested position. Potentially black will have the opportunity to play bishop a6 and make it a good bishop. But here, I don't know. Like maybe knight to g8 might be the best move. After this bishop takes e3, bishop takes e3, takes e3, and then knight d5 is the main line actually, which seems to lose a full pawn. But I don't know. I guess white's pawn structure is so mangled that that's really okay. Queen h4 here, check. G3 or king d1. Say g3, queen b4, queen d2, and this is just one of the sidelines that black can play out of bishop c5, trying to transpose this Scotch 4 knights game Scotch into a more standard Scotch game. So yeah, so knight c6, d4, pawn takes, queen e7. So now basically we are in we're in a non-theoretical position. The theoretical position was bishop to b4, but queen e7 is an interesting sideline. It puts pressure immediately on e4. I bet it's not really that, I bet the analysis is being sort of ungenerous with it. And bishop to g5, as a follow-up, gives black some opportunities to sort of reorganize. Knight takes d4 makes sense. Knight takes d4, h6, bishop h4, g5, bishop g3, d6, maybe. And basically, this. Actually, no. That sort of leaves the queen on d4 as able to attack too much. Probably a better transposition involves bishop to g7 if h4 and g5 are going to get played. So let's look. Bishop g5 gets played, h6, bishop takes f6. I guess that's an interesting question. A mistake is a tough. It's hard to assess those things. Objectively speaking, based on engine analysis, generally yes. Generally, those are considered to be mistakes. The engine best moves are considered to be the correct. Are considered to be the book moves. They're usually the same moves. I guess I would say it depends on how intentional it is. Basically, you're accepting an inefficiency, right? Like your eval is generally going against you. Yeah, thanks, Jack. I don't know if I have, but it was definitely some good opening theory there. Yeah, so it does. It puts pressure on e4. I wouldn't say it's a mistake because a lot of times the best move, second best move, and in book and out of book moves are within relatively close margin to each other. And there's many times when playing a non-book move provides practical compensation, even if it is clearly differentiated by the engine. But it's an interesting question. So yeah, I guess I would say the strongest is generally theory, but just the fact that you have left theory does not necessarily make a move bad. It makes it unusual. Unusual, solid or unusual not solid, depends. But yeah, I don't know. I guess given if you're in the process of learning, I would say play theory for as long as possible, unless you're intentionally trying to surprise your opponent. Hey, FIFA Boy, thank you very much for joining the stream. FIFA Boy is one of the lone moderators and one of the earliest viewers on this stream, so he is here. So h6, bishop takes f6, queen takes f6, knight takes, and then queen takes. So here, I guess I would say, this is not a superior line for black. What I would do here as black is play d takes c6. I think d takes c6 is better than queen takes c6 for developmental reasons. I think thank you today actually. But yeah, so basically, when the knight takes c6, I guess I would say d xc6 should be sort of recognizable as an improvement, because d takes c6 allows you to gain mobility for your bishop, like probably to e6, and potentially your rook to d8. But queen takes c6, although it defends c7 directly, doesn't offer those benefits. Also, one of the main potential issues for white here is a fork on c7. So with d takes c6, the main approaching squares are movable here. Is b takes c6? Probably. There are a lot of like Ruy Lopez type lines where b takes c6 is actually playable. It doesn't create any problems, I don't think. I think it's I think it's probably more aggressive. It's probably going to allow this bishop to develop via this diagonal, which is one that can provide more aggressive attacking chances. But I think at the end of the day, I think d takes c6 is more solid. And the reason why another reason why I think d takes c6 is better than b takes c6 is b takes c6 disconnects the pawn structure. It does have a value of, potentially rook to b8, rook to b2, is another benefit of playing b takes c6. So it is, yeah, the answer is yes, it's definitely playable, Hyperion. But I think d takes c6 is better. Just because it keeps the pawn structure all together. B takes c6, rook takes b8, rook to b2 is an attacking threat. So I think b takes c6 is a more aggressive option. But I would lean towards d takes c6 when evaluating the pawn structure. But they're fairly similar, I think. But both of them are playable. Is the answer. But I think queen takes c6 is not. I think queen takes c6 doesn't provide the same advantages to mobility that d takes or b takes plays. So I think taking with a pawn here is probably preferable. Let's look. Black's in fairly good position. Now I assume bishop b4 is played on the next move. Bishop b4, I guess, is a move that sort of it basically is the ability to play a more dangerous b4 does probably come along with queen to c6. I guess, bishop b4 might work from queen f6 too. But yeah, it's definitely something to think about stemming from queen takes c6. d6, castles, bishop f3 shifts the eval, but I don't really see why. Not like a super not a super crazy move. Bishop a3. Let's see that move. Oh, what? Yeah, I never would. It's a really cool move, actually, though, to be honest. Bishop to a3 is the best. Yeah, I would never. It's a really cool tactic, actually. The computer seems to find these really cool positional tactics. But yeah, no, I think you would have to be a really, really good player to see bishop a3. But it's encouraging. It's sort of like that type of situation does exist. So I think it's kind of good tactical study, right? That makes seeing bishop a3 here makes me think a little bit more about moves like that in the future, like moves where you're deflecting the pawn from the defense of the piece. Like that's a very thematically advanced tactic. Really cool. Yeah, it's pretty cool though. Yeah, I think so. Yeah, because the queen can't really defend. I think the response might be bishop, or the correct response is it queen to c1 there. Let's just look at bishop a3 because that's pretty wild. I think it's queen c1. Yeah. So white would then play queen c1 as a response. Now maybe queen takes c3, bishop takes c1, and the pawns are actually doubled. On white's best response, the queen takes c3 after queen c1, and it's not a material loss; it's just double. But yeah, pretty interesting. Hey, thank you very much for the observe, WTF. Thank you, appreciate it. So queen takes c3, pawn takes c3, bishop takes c1, and black's in pretty good shape with a fractured white pawn structure. But cool, good find. I was gonna breeze right through that, so thank you for seeing that. Yes, that was that's his name. But yeah, castles, bishop f3, queen to c5, queen to d4, queen to g5, and yeah, I mean, black basically has, black has a better eval. White's pawn structure is pretty much what's responsible for that favorable eval, and but I think black's playing pretty solid. I haven't seen really any errors from black after queen to c3. Queen to c3, take away, play a move that improves the bishop's mobility, as opposed to moving the queen again in the opening. But yeah, this looks like good play, solid play for black. Rook there, and yeah, now there's a real opportunity. So what? I guess there's an inaccuracy here. So why is bishop to d5 an inaccuracy? I have to think about that for a second. Maybe bishop takes uh, bishop takes a6 looks like a pretty appealing tactic for white. Bishop to d5, I'm wondering why. Basically, the computer's evaluating that as an error, but I guess it provides the rook the opportunity to double on b6 and play rook b1. No, it actually, I think sort of, but it basically provides black with an opportunity to play the rook to b6. Rook to b6 is a strong move here. So basically on c5, the rook's forced back to like either b7 or f4, and we'll have to attack from there. But the rook will get this added defense, so bishop takes a6 is never really going to become a threat. But on bishop to d5, white can play rook to b6 and basically lock in this bishop takes a6 threat. From this rook. So the correct move, or the solidest move here was c5 with a defense on this, basically a discovered defense on this a6 pawn. But here, after bishop to d5, rook to b6 looks like a pretty good way to keep this threat forever. And now c5 is unplayable because rook takes rook, and on the next move, so say like rook to d8, rook to b1, and basically bishop to a6 is going to become a threat again, even if black plays c5 here. So the fact that you're basically locking in and preventing c5 with rook to b6. With c5 directly, white doesn't have the same tactical combination that locks in the pawn on c6. But here he does. So the engine's saying rook to b6, and then the ability to ultimately win a pawn on the queen side here for white. Anyways, white doesn't do that. White instead plays bishop to a6, and then black plays c5 and gets this awesome discovery and wins at least one of the pieces. Rook takes, and yeah, this is a really good position for black now. Yeah, I mean, it's a good win for sure. Basically you played accurately, and then saw this tactic that allowed you to win a piece, and a piece is generally enough to win the game. So overall strong and good idea. Yeah, I guess in terms of takeaways from this game, things to think about in the future. There's many opportunities where you have where basically you are choosing to take between the d pawn and the b pawn and potentially the queen. But basically the advantages of moving one of the pawns to take the piece is you get this advanced mobility. I understand queen takes c6 for a few reasons. First, it allows you to attack on the c file directly. That's good. Second, it allows you to attack the e4 pawn. And third, and I think this might have been why one would be tempted to play it, is it keeps the pawn structure from getting doubled. And that that is something that has value. Not doubling the pawns is better than doubling the pawns, all things equal. But in this particular case, queen takes c6. Basically the value of the it was good, beginner. Yeah, no, we went through them I think yesterday night. They were interesting. Sure, yeah, beginner, if you send the game over, we'll add it for tomorrow morning at 10 a.m. Eastern. So yeah, so d takes here allows this open file for the bishop, or this way allows this open file for the bishop. But basically, the value of the extra mobility for black is worth the doubled pawn that you would get. So I think that logic, not avoiding the doubled pawns, is something that theoretically makes sense. But in this particular case, black needs to develop. So accepting a not particularly bad doubled pawn for later in the game is worth is worth the development, or the better opportunity for healthy development of the white bishop, and potentially the open file for the rook on the d file. But yeah, so anyways, I think that's one thing to consider in this game. One takeaway is I think taking with one of the pawns is better. Um, yeah, and then the second one is basically this, this tactic. This tactics are difficult to see. You want to do as much tactical training as you can, and you want to make sure that you're maximizing tactically. At the end of the day, that's work that needs to be. That's not something that you can get from a lesson. That's something that you basically can get from hard work. But this rook to b6 move. Locking everything in place and providing fixed targets for white is a strong move. So with that, I think playing c5 and not letting the same kind of locking occur on the queenside pawns here is an improvement over bishop to d5. Bishop to d5 makes some sense. I mean, you might pair it with c5, and then it would be having this backwards defense on b7. That's something that could be valuable. You might want to. I don't think it will come into play, but it looks good to have the bishop on the long diagonal and potentially aiming towards the king side. But I think the main it's actually more directly valuable to have this bishop facing this b7 pawn in this case. Anyways, c5 is a move that doesn't allow bishop to b6 or rook to b6, and that's why that's the best here. But just as a middle game, late middle game tactic, sometimes fixing your opponent's pieces, white had the opportunity to do here, is something that has value. This basically fixes, gives really good targets for white to attack, so that none of the pawns can move. White's king isn't really in trouble at any point, so like g3 gets you out of trouble here, a5 maybe, but advances on b7 make it kind of like this basically makes it a pretty good situation for white if everything's locked down. So when these targets are fixed, white then has multiple targets and black can't respond to either of them. So another improvement here, this bishop to d5 makes sense for this basically strategic reason. You don't want to allow your opponent to fix your target when he has open files and attacking chances. Also just, in a little bit more superficially, this c5 defends this a6 pawn from the bishop attack at any point. So after c5, the bishop basically has lost its opportunity to play bishop takes a6, because playing b takes a6 isn't necessary. But yeah, that's interesting. It's an interesting game. Overall, very I thought pretty well played by black. It's a good game and a good win, and you played accurately enough till your opponent gave you a piece, and then you played the correct tactical execution to get the piece. Strong game, and interesting. Thank you very much for sending it in, El Gecko, and please keep sending games. They're super interesting for me, and so that rook b6 move, but I think those are two small takeaways. But I really appreciate you sending the game, and really appreciate you having you on the stream, and please keep sending them, and feel free to participate. But thanks so much, El Gecko, and hope to see you again soon. So I'll add that game. I'll add those games. I'll add one of those two games for analysis tomorrow during the 10 a.m. stream, beginner. Thank you very much for sending it. So tomorrow at 10 a.m. If anyone else wants to send a game, we have one more free slot, and then but we still have one more free slot for tomorrow's 10 a.m. stream if anyone wants to send another game in. Okay, cool. On to the next game. Sorry, I just need to get the door for 1 second. I'll get it. Hello? Perfect. Yeah, let her out. Thanks. Cool. Yeah, sorry about that, guys. Jen has a few friends over tonight, so I needed to sort of stay on top of that. Okay, cool. The next game is Sorley's game. Sorley plays white, and I may want to make sure that we got to this one. D4, G6. Not quite, but you know, Jen's having two friends over, and yeah, it's a Tuesday night, you know.
I'm here.
Hey Dahlia, how are you?
Good, you?
Good. Just doing the stream, but Jen and Caitlin are in the other room.
Cool. I
Cool.
was like, where are they?
Yeah. No, I just doing the stream. But yeah, so this is it's nice to see you.
Nice to meet you.
This is a Sorley's game, and basically this is it looks like King's Indian, right? Yeah, there's people here. Modern.
Hi!
And Jen. But yeah, so
Let us
D4.
know if you can hear us in the other room.
It's all good.
Hi, Aphelion and others.
Bye. But yeah, so E4 and D4 here, and G6, Knight F6, Knight C3, Bishop G7, Knight F3. And this is basically pretty straightforward modern defense, Norwegian variation. We've played this a few times, I think, on here, but let's look. So the options here are D6, transposing it into like King's Indian defense or Perk, and here black instead castles. So it's basically maintains the definition of this Norwegian defense. A few options here, but overwhelmingly D6 is played. I don't know if it's better. Let's look at the eval. I guess D6 is a little better, but not enough to actually make any changes in your decisions based off of. I don't think. Yeah, I know, right? Well, we all do things that we enjoy. I'll catch up with them after the stream. They'll be around for a bit. So yeah, so D6 here, castles, Bishop C4, Knight C6, and here Knight takes E4 was an opportunity for black, I think. Yeah, no, right? So yeah, so after Bishop C4, Knight could play takes E4, I think, right? Unless I'm missing something. We have an interesting situation because it looks like the engine is suggesting D6, but the eval suggests Knight takes E4. This is one of those places. So this would be a place where deviation from theory is not not necessarily a problem, right? Computer eval points pretty clearly towards Knight takes E4, and black is looking at D6 here, right? Yeah, I mean, it is pretty interesting. So I'm actually curious. Let's go through this this Knight takes E4 line. D5, DX, BX. I mean, yeah, it looks pretty good for black. Queen D2. It's weird that the the position is so favorable to black here, though. Like, it doesn't look like, if I were to assess this position, I wouldn't necessarily say that black was winning by a lot. Black's development looks a little bit, slow, right? I guess this open file is powerful for black. This open fianchetto is powerful for black. But overall, I think, yeah, then the king is up to C3. But yeah, I don't know. 1.12 for black here is yeah, king safety I guess is bad for white, but it's hard to capitalize on that. I mean, there might be like annoying checks that black can do, but like I'm not sure if yeah. Yes, the white king is going for the party. That's right. But yeah, so this yeah, so this long diagonal, this rook on d8, I think overall caused it to be a positive eval for black, but I don't know. That's surprising for me. King on c3, I just don't think it's that vulnerable. But yeah, the combination of those factors makes black have a favorable eval here. Interesting. But I'm more interested here. I mean, that gives us a sense of why that eval was was favorable. But just here, like, look how there's a big discrepancy here between d6, which is the most popular line, and knight takes e4, which is the most objectively correct line according to this engine, right? So interesting. I guess we can play through the knight takes e4 theory. Knight takes e4, d5, bishop d3. Huh. Yeah, I mean, these types of positions, this is sort of what high-level masters are looking for. Basically these types of lines where the there's a difference between what's the book and what the computer finds is the best. I'd like to take a look at it with maybe a more powerful engine just so we could see. But overall, this is interesting. An interesting thing that happens here. So knight c6 is played instead, and white has a good lead here. Bishop f4. The knight takes e4 threat is good again. a5, d5, a3. And overall here, it looks like a pretty interesting and sort of tactically complicated situation. White has a good position. E5 probably isn't an overextension here. On e5, knight would play, the computer's recommending knight to d5. I'm more curious about knight to h5, because that looks more annoying. Knight d5, I think, just wins a piece, right? Or just wins a pawn. So knight takes, c takes, b takes. And then, white has basically consolidated a material advantage here. But knight takes f7, e5, and yeah, good discovery, I guess. But yeah, overall, I think white's playing pretty well. Are there any improvements for white's game here? I'm not 100% sure about that. I guess knight to knight to e5 seems a little bit premature. I guess I'm sort of curious, why is knight is knight to e5, like, what's the logic behind that? There's threats on f7, and maybe potentially like bishop takes f7, knight takes c6. But I'm not seeing the reasoning behind that move super well. It doesn't improve white's white's control of the center. I mean, this control of the center is actually better than this control of the center. Overall, I don't know if that's really an improvement. There's a number of other moves here, but this feels a little bit awkward and vulnerable on this diagonal. So knight d5, and then like knight h5, I guess, is where my eyes go. But knight c5 was played, knight takes f7, and this really got tactically complicated. In fact, I think from here, basically, rook takes appears to be forced. You guys are funny. But yeah, so knight takes f7, and rook takes, I think, is forced, and a forced kind of liquidation there. Knight d6 and this discovery on the queen. But overall, I think it's pretty much. I think this is pretty much better for white here. Like f3 maybe. But I don't know. Rook e1. So yeah, so I guess I would revisit that knight to e5 move. I think knight to e5 is an overextension. I hope it would be good to know sort of what the threats that white was going for there would be. But knight to e5, knight to c5, and knight takes f7 lead to a great position for white. White ends up winning the queen and winning the game. But a few interesting things going on with the engine there. So let's go back to this. D4, G6, Bishop C4, Bishop F4, and yeah, but I want to go back to this. So knight takes E4 here looks pretty good, and is not the book move. In fact, the book is still recommending D6 here. I don't know where the knight takes E4 moves are going, but yeah, that seems to be an improvement. E5, A3, knight A6, castles, C6, takes C6. But yeah, this seems to really be a good win for white. Anyways, let's hey, thank you very much for the observe, Anchorless. I appreciate it. Thank you. So here, what does what should white be doing if not knight to E5? Otherwise I think it's pretty solid. White got a good strong attack in. The knight E5 I just think is too aggressive. It ends up playing out fantastically here, but I think it doesn't really end up providing white with a solid attack. E5 maybe, H3. Okay, I mean E5 makes sense. E5, knight to H5. Geez, like bishop to G3. White has a little bit of a liability with that pawn in the center, but overall, I think white's in pretty good place. Anyways, yeah, interesting. Otherwise, excellently played game, a short one. And I think the only improvement really that I can provide, I could nitpick on these games after, or basically on the situation after, the queen is won. But I think the main opportunity for improvement here was on that knight e5 move. Knight e5 is sort of a conceptually too aggressive move. White, I think, needs to make a more complete development before he starts launching an attack here. Also, just the placement of the knight in front of the pawn is a bit awkward. But yeah, anyways, this move is interesting. I guess maybe White was looking for an outpost here and figured that this knight couldn't be attacked because the c6 pawn would hang. But anyways, that's of all the moves that White played. There were some excellent tactical ones, but I think this knight to e5 was a little bit premature. E5 or bishop to g3 maybe, or rook to e1 here. I would advise before knight to e5. But yeah, anyways, great attack for White. Won that queen. Cool discovery. Knight to d6 wins the game pretty much right there. And overall, yeah, well played. Thanks for the game, Sorley. Yeah, no, I appreciate it. Thank you. Let's look at Natis's game. Natis is next and playing black. Oh my. Well, look. Well, since you can't actually come to the party, Aphelion, that's really nice of you. Thank you, thank you very much for doing that, and very much not expected, but very nice. Thank you for that. Really, yeah, I really appreciate you supporting the stream that way. This is very nice of you to do, and you even get one to Caitlin, who's here. Thank you, Aphelion. Caitlin is Katie Caruso Dobbs on here, so that was really nice. Thank you for contributing.
Thanks, Aphelion.
Yeah, thanks, Aphelion.
Legally, I'd like to point out that I said might be invited.
That was very nice. You can come to a different party, I think, but unless you're in New York City, but I assume that you are not. But yeah, thanks, Aphelion. That was really nice of you. Thank you. Unexpected, but a very nice thing for you to do. So thanks. I guess we owe you one party. But thanks. Yeah, thank you, Aphelion. It was very nice of you. Yeah. But yeah. Anyways, this is great. Really nice. Really nice. These guys might get some. but I'm teaching. So anyways, this is Natissa's game. Natisse plays black, and let's take it from there. So e4, e5, knight c3, knight f6, bishop c5, and yeah, interesting. Bishop g5, knight takes, pawn takes, h6, bishop h4. Yeah, this looks like pretty straightforward. You know, like 4 knights game. Bishop c5, I'm not sure is the way to do this. I think basically knight to c6 is sort of needed. After bishop c5, knight takes e5, and you know, there probably are some crazy like Traxler type lines or something like that that you know, that make this sort of playable, but I don't know. I think you're steering into territory where you're giving the e5 pawn and the e4 pawn is defended, so it's a little bit more of a challenge. Anyways, bishop to c4, knight to c6, d3, knight a5, bishop to g5, and here options are d6 or knight takes c4, d takes, h6, d6, and yeah, here, you know, basically black's traded into a relatively normal position. Bishop takes f6 is an idea. Queen to d3 is an idea, but black is pretty much equalized. I think getting that that knight taking c4 was enough to swing the analysis. Well, we owe you one party, man. If you wanted to go. I'm holding Jen accountable for that promise. But it's very nice of you to donate the subs. Very appreciated. Thank you. So anyways, castles, rook g8, a3, bishop h3, b4, and black's basically you know, improving on his attack. No, it's really nice of you. Thank you. And I hope everyone who got a sub can yeah, can come by for more streaming. It was a very nice gift of Phelion, so yeah, thanks for that. So yeah, so anyways, here basically I would suggest not hanging the pawn on e5. Knight to c6, you know, defends the pawn, and that opportunity kind of resolves. Knight takes c4, pawn takes c4, and h6, and now black has equalized. Basically, knight to a5, knight takes c4 has caused the sides to be equal here. d6 and pawn takes pawn takes f6. Castles, rook g8, a3. And black is trying to capitalize on his, basically he's aggressively pushing a small positional advantage, trying to make it a tactical advantage. Bishop takes c4 is black's best option here. It sort of steers away from the general lines of this attack. Bishop takes c4, and this rook is being threatened. But I think here, you know, now it's really a win for black. I think white made some tactical oversights here, and you know, white didn't necessarily capitalize. Starting with knight takes e5. So as you know, looking at black's game, I can make sort of a few suggestions. I think knight a5 made a lot of sense. I think knight c6 was needed. So first, knight c6 I think was needed a bit sooner. I think this knight on e5, or this e5 pawn, is not really supposed to hang after the basic, you know, after the basic, you know, first two moves, attack, you know, that attack, knight f3, knight f6, e4, e5. After those four moves, I think you pretty much have to defend the pawn on e5. It's no longer undefended after knight c3. Second takeaway, I think this move, you know, this type of moving was good. Knight takes e5, or knight takes c4 here is good. On knight takes e5, knight takes c4, knight takes c4. This is a complicated position. You know, white's knights are good, but the one on c4 is not particularly misplaced, and I think can probably get kicked. Anyways, I think basically this is this is a complicated position. But given that knight takes e5 is still not played here, knight takes c4 gives you an advantage. d6 defends the e5 pawn, really cementing the fact that the knight's not going to take it. Pawn takes f6, castles, rook g8 is good, a3, bishop h3, and overall here, basically after bishop takes g2, I think it's really a good position for black. Best response here is bishop to g3, but then bishop can take the rook, so that's a win of an exchange and probably enough to win the game. Yeah, no, exactly, Aphelion. Totally agree. I think that basically after the e4, e5, knight f3, knight f6. That's the time when that's as long as black should leave that pawn undefended. After that, knight c6 or d6, I think should probably be played. Yeah, no, agree. So knight a5 is in inaccuracy given that white can play knight takes e5, but it worked out great with bishop to g5. Here black's basically equalized. So I'm not sure. Yeah, so I don't think I would recommend knight a5 if that pawn's not defended. Maybe knight a5 is a good general concept, but maybe d6 first. So like d6 here is probably the book move. Yeah, so if we look at the book here, 75% of the games are d6 defending this e5 pawn, and knight f5 is next to be played. So like bishop a5 and then knight a5 is a very common move after that. Doubling that pawn on c4 I think is a good idea. Plays out well for black. Yeah, so I think that's one of the main tactical opportunities for black to equalize out of the Guaco Piano, or even Ruy Lopez. That knight a5 trading for white's good bishop usually ends up being a pretty good play. Anyways, yeah, so this is cool. Knight a5, knight takes c4 tends to be a pretty solid possibility. And then all of this tactical, white basically makes a few oversights, but I think applying pressure on this king side works pretty well. Maybe this attack could be a little bit slower. Black never really gives up his lead here. b4, bishop takes g2, bishop takes f3, discovery, and wins a bunch of stuff. White could have played bishop to g3, in which case, so say after rook g8, bishop to g3. Here, bishop. Oh well, he needs to defend that c4 pawn first. The engine is advocating playing bishop to take c4, which sort of slows down your attack. But yeah, overall, Natisse, a good game. I would say that you really want to make sure that your tactics are as strong as possible. My standard theory is an hour of tactics a day for a month. Chess Tempo, chess.com, Puzzle Battles, Puzzle Rush. If you do that, I guarantee you'll improve. It's basically you really need to just put that work in to raise your game up. I think that's the next step for you, and I think it'll work if you do it. Pretty confident. Overall, an interesting game, and but yeah, I think these types of tactical opportunities can you can allow much fewer tactical opportunities to your opponent, and overall play much cleaner tactical shots against your opponent. So basically, good game, and I think I think you got a great attack going. My main advice is just continue the tactical study so you can make those attacks as precise as possible. But yeah, no, good game. Thank you very much for sending it, Natisse, and I really appreciate it. Please keep sending these games. There's a lot of interesting material there, and I really like to see them. Let's look at the next one. Next one, the real is playing as black, so we'll take it from his perspective. And here we go. Sorry, this small pop-up is okay, cool. So let's take this from black's perspective, the reals game. E4, E5, knight F3, knight C6, bishop C4, knight F6. Two knights against the Italian game. D3, bishop to B4. Bishop to B4 is kind of an interesting play. Bishop to C5 is the most common. If we look at this, bishop to B4 is well down this list. Bishop to B4, is interesting, but it basically, creates an opportunity where white can play either knight C3, developing, with on his force move, or C3, which sort of just directs this bishop backwards. C3 comes with the problem that that it does take away white's C3 square for the knight, but here, and basically, on bishop C5, D4 can be played. But I think C3 is a good move because often in these types of openings, a theme is knight to D2, knight to F1, knight to G3. That in that period, there's no there's no real disruption to that. There's no disruption to that plan coming from C3. So bishop to B4, allowing C3 to be played, basically with tempo on the attack against the bishop, which then has to move. It's a move that basically helps white. So I think I would play kind of the more. I think this two knights defense is good. But I think on D3, black should go for something a little bit more traditional, either bishop to C5 or bishop to E7. H6 is also, played in many games. I'd play bishop to C5. Yeah, thanks, Crocky. We will. I'll add that game for tomorrow morning at 10 a.m. Is when the next open slot. So we'll look at that game, Crocky, at tomorrow morning at 10 a.m. Eastern, unless you prefer. Unless you prefer 6:05 p.m. Eastern tomorrow, we can get to it then as well. So yeah, whichever. If you don't say anything, I'll do it at 10. But if you prefer 6, I can put it for 6. Up to you. But thank you very much for sending it, and we'll get it. We'll get it in very soon. Okay, cool. 10 a.m. Eastern is it. We will. That will be at the end of the 10 a.m. Eastern time stream tomorrow morning. Thanks for sending it, Crocky, and thanks for contributing to the stream. So bishop to C3 I think or bishop to C5 I think is a better idea. Bishop to B4 allowing C3 is just too much tempo for white. So say instead bishop to C5, C3, D6, and D4 may end up being played anyways, relatively soon, but castles, A6, and this this basically takes us into very mainline Guaco piano theory. Okay, but let's look at bishop to B5. Now bishop C5, and I'm sort of, basically I think this is a little bit strange because, this is a position that happens a lot in the Guaco piano, and there's 1,200 games here, but I'm sort of wondering how they happened because white has an extra tempo. It's kind of interesting, but there's many games actually played out of this. The mainline response is D4. Second is bishop to B5. D4 and black basically faces a lot of the problems that he generally does with with D4 being played in the Guaco piano. D5 gets played, knight takes D5, queen B3. And basically another relatively familiar looking Guaco piano position. But yeah, so here bishop to B5, C3, D6, and then castles immediately before D4. D6, and now D4. So this is basically one of the main strategies in the Italian game. White gets this D4 push supported. If pawn takes, pawn can retake. The e4 pawn is temporarily unsupported, but basically black has to choose between either trading the e pawn or playing bishop to b6, and they're both equally popular. I'm kind of curious. It looks like bishop to b6 is evaluated as slightly better for black, leading to equality, which I guess is sort of an interesting takeaway, right? You have two equally popular opening lines in a pretty common Italian game position. So, bishop to b6 being the bishop to b6 being the second most popular, but objectively better. That's something to consider. I guess I would say, probably based on this engine analysis, bishop to b6. Yeah, no, I agree. I think knight takes e4 and I think you're right about that. I think rook e1, and then maybe rook e1 can potentially pin the knight, but yes, you're right. There's a lot of tactics that make e4. It's pretty dangerous. But yeah, I'm more impressed sort of by this this bishop to b6 being solidly better than pawn takes d4 here, because they are both equally well played. This sort of makes me inclined to play bishop to b6 in the future. I play the Italian games, so I go up against these lines pretty frequently. One of the things that I do in the Italian game is I play queen f6. It's usually not objectively that good, but it does take the opponent out of the book. A lot of good wins with the early attacks. But yeah, bishop to b6 is actually very clearly the objectively better line here. Interesting. Here, pawn takes pawn, which is which, by the way, pawn takes pawn here, pawn takes d4 is the most popular response in the opening book. So both are very playable. Yeah, right. I mean yes. I mean that's one of multiple problems that can happen in Hyperion. Pawn takes pawn, bishop b6. And then, yeah, options for white. Bishop to g5 is one of them. Straightforward development, knight to c3. But one of the main characteristics of this position is basically that, there's very good center control for white here. Knight to c3, like we were talking about, probably just play bishop to g5 and, I don't know, bishop to f4, maybe. H3. The knight e4, the e4 pawn, is not really hanging. Is the main point. It becomes hanging if d5 can be comfortably played, but it usually can't. Anyways, straightforward development for white is good. He's got a huge spatial advantage. This center is clearly much stronger for white. This fifth rank is pretty safely white's, and this bishop doesn't provide nearly the same amount of opportunities that this bishop does. So, bishop is basically on a restricted diagonal. I mean, it would be a good diagonal if the d4 pawn weren't there, but it is, so that's that. Knight e5, bishop takes, knight takes, queen takes f3. Yeah, I think basically black is yeah, I think black's in pretty good. Basically black has neutralized a lot of this. I think the situation, with the center here, poses more danger to black, but I don't know. I guess this is all, this is all fine. I hate deferring to the engine, but I guess this is better for black than I thought it was. I figure this center is provides white with a lot of opportunities here, but the engine doesn't find this as favorable as my site does. But yeah, anyways, this all trades off. H6, queen takes, and I'm again a little bit surprised by the engine's eval. White has the better minor piece. The black has the better minor piece, and these pawns here I think are pretty weak. These are the weakest pawns in black's position, but I wouldn't figure that they're rotating. Like I think king e7, rook g8, c6. I guess these pawns are hard to remove. Like it's hard to trade off the f pawn, and then even then, you do have you do have isolated pawns, even if you can trade off one of the doubled ones. So I guess, white's positive eval is based off of the weakness of this f7 and f6 structure. That makes sense, I guess. But yeah, black has the better minor piece, so his plans should probably try to capitalize on that. Unfortunately, white looks like he's getting a pretty quick attack in on the queen side. This could be dangerous. Here, I guess rook a8. But I want to catch without looking at the eval. I'm kind of curious to see why the eval shift. What was so bad about rook to c4? I don't know. Let's try to figure this out now. I guess rook to c4. Okay, so you want to? I'm happy because I actually solved this one without the computer. But rook to c4 has a key problem, which I think if you look for another minute, you would all see, if you haven't seen it already. Rook to c4 stops this a pawn from being defended correctly. The ideal defense of this a pawn is the weakest part of white's position. It's an isolated pawn. It's on an open file, and unlike the e pawn, it's easily attacked and can't be supported by any of white's pawns. So when white plays rook to c4, this a4 target becomes very vulnerable. So rook to a8. And then exactly Hyperion. This rook to a8, rook to a1. I mean, it probably isn't necessary this move because it's already defended once. But rook to a1, rook to a5, something like probably f4, rook to a8, and now this pawn's getting double threatened, and b5 can be played. So that was actually so I was looking at, I could see on the left in eval. Yeah, it's that. It's basically the most vulnerable piece becomes more attackable on rook to c4. And rook to c4 is sort of it's sort of, white basically, I think, white would, intuitively think that his a pawn would be getting safer here, right? Like, it's good that this a pawn is getting an extra defender on it, because it is the weakest piece on the board for white. But the way in which it's defended here makes it. So here, rook to c4, rook to a8, rook to a1, rook to a5. Here, this is better for black, and he's going to be able, particularly because b5 also threatened, so that on b5, that rook can't maintain itself on the c file. Maybe this might even be more dangerous than that. Like, let's say this line, where like the king goes to f2 or something, since nothing can be really progressed here. The rook has to move, right? Pawn takes isn't playable, so the rook has to move. And then maybe after like rook c2 or rook c1, let's say rook c2, I think b4 is actually the better response for black. The engine disagrees. I guess it's rook takes a4, rook takes a4, pawn takes a4. It's a pass pawn either way. But I was thinking b4 is strong because these pawns are connected and passed. But this looks like it's getting close to a win for black. It's going to be really hard for white to hold this position against these two doubled pawns here, or these connected pass pawns here. They're very dangerous. Anyways, this overall leads to a win for white, and this is actually what happened in the game, right? This rook moves to c4. Black sees it. Black doubles his rooks on the a file. Or no, he doesn't double his rooks on the a file. He just gets by playing b5, which makes sense. Yeah, it's New York City, man. It's just there's all sorts of stuff going on, and there's a lot of stuff in New York City. It's interesting. I should probably close the window. I get less feedback. But yeah, this overall I think is I think is gonna be pretty solid for black. I think black basically wins this game. Against rook c4, rook c4 really was a tactical error here. B6, b5 gets played, and it gets knocked off of that file after the rook's on a1. Interesting. Good job capitalizing on that for black. The real good work. Just thinking about this. Where can black have improved in this game? It was a pretty good game. I think especially at the end, there was strong pressure on that rook file, and that won it for you. Great idea, great execution. I like bishop c5 a lot more than bishop to b4 here. White gets a free development either of this pawn to c3 or this knight to c3. So I'm going to advocate going with bishop to c5, which is the most popular move next time. It was a good game. It was good execution by black on the queen side. But here here we know for future streams, and I know for future games. Here bishop to b6 is objectively better based on the engine. That's interesting and sort of news because e takes d4 and bishop to b6 are played almost as frequently at master level. So finding that bishop to b6 is significantly better according to the engine is news to me and reason to choose that one of the two options. Interesting. So that's improvement for that I didn't know until this game. Bishop takes, knight takes, and here, I guess I'm sort of wondering, maybe bishop takes. Maybe here just leave the bishop on f3. It's not very powerful there, but I understand taking it to separate white from his bishop pair. So even though there's an inaccuracy here, I definitely understand it at least. The engine saying h6 or castles or a6, but I definitely understand it. I guess the engine's probably evaluating bishop to f3 on the basis of this move. Certainly in this position, this bishop is not providing much value to white. This diagonal is blocked off probably forever, right? It's never going to get through e4, d5, or g2. So trading for it is an idea. Here h6, bishop takes, pawn takes. Okay. But the engine is saying that black has better here. I don't know. I'm sort of conflicted about this one because I'm like, okay, yeah, it's definitely a good idea to separate white from his bishop pair, but it's also a but that bishop is not really doing anything right now, as opposed to this knight, which is actually has a lot of value. I mean, it's on a pretty good outpost actually. Overall, an interesting situation. I'm not sure if I advocate the trade or I guess I would do the trade probably in real life, but it's an interesting one, and I'm sort of conflicted about it because the engine is saying that trading this well-posted knight for that poorly posted bishop is not worth it, even though it's a trade for white's bishop pair, eliminating the bishop pair. Interesting question. Much I have so either way there. Just that one's more just an analysis question to think about. And then from here, basically, I think it's after c4, it's really black capitalizing well on this rook and pawn endgame. Looks like a win. Good. Good job. Good job. The real winning that one. Very interesting. Thank you very much for sending it. My one takeaway, I think this one is pretty basic, but I think the error or the move that I like, or the move that I would be the most interested in correcting for black here is bishop to b4. I just don't think that's the best idea. You bring white's pieces forward with tempo, or however you say it. I think of it as tempo, but tempo could also potentially mean that they're attacking you. But anyways, with saved time, white is advancing his pieces with saved time on bishop to b4. So bishop to c5, and this is this is looking fairly good for white until bishop to g5 is played. That said, we both, I learned at least that pawn takes d4 is a better option for white. Here in this position, when black is choosing between pawn takes d4 and bishop to b6, bishop to b6 is the best option, objectively, between two options that basically appear to be equally good, theoretically. So that's something to learn. Otherwise, this is a complicated thing to think about, but I don't have much of a correction there. And then, yeah, good play. The move I liked the least in this whole game was that early bishop to b4, bishop to c5, and I think you're pretty safe. So anyways, yeah, thank you very much for sending that, The Real. Please keep sending them. Super interesting game, and yeah, I appreciate you contributing material to the stream. Thanks. Cool. Next game is next game I think is Ansh's. Ansh is in a different time zone, so he's not here, but he will be watching this tomorrow, which is cool. Oops, this is a Lee chess, so I'm gonna pull it. I'm gonna import it. But yeah, overall, good game. Yeah, good game for The Real there. Interesting stuff. Really makes me, that's a pretty deep question, that one about exchanging the knight that's posted for the second bishop that's not currently in a good position. That one makes me think a little bit, and I don't know. I mean, those are the types of decisions that I guess they're situationally related, but an interesting one to think about. Cool. Next game. This is Ansh is playing black, so let's take it from his perspective. Ansh is playing the Scandinavian. Okay, cool. I know the Scandinavian pretty well. Knight c3, queen d8. This is the old school. I think Magnus was playing this for a minute. There's, I think, a few games from Magnus here where he trades that off and then undevelops his queen. So I think it is playable. I'm used to playing queen d6 and c6. That was the Scandinavian that I played. But some interesting theory here for sure. And it's sort of unexplored, because the Scandinavian was written off so long as a really amateur opening. But I think a lot of interesting material in the Scandinavian that hasn't been seen like a tremendous amount. Are we still in the opening book? Let's see. Here, bishop c4, second most common, and c6 is the most common. C6 over knight c6. I definitely am more familiar with c6. Basically one of the things that white can potentially do if you're not super careful on the black side is basically white, like knight c6 here, e5 may not be playable yet, but that threat is going to be available for the entire game. So I guess I would push for c6 here, partially because I know it the best, or know positions similar to that the best, and partially because it's basically the most explored option. But I think if you developed pieces too early here, white will have more attacking chances. Quick development is good. Bishop to g4 is a way to get your pieces out. But especially knight in front of the pawn like that, when there's a pawn on running the knight c6 against the pawn on d4 is a little bit is sort of tactically tricky. Moves like d5 can become available for white and cause a problem for black. So I lean towards c6. C6 over other things because that's what I know. I'm sure a6 is fine too. and let's see what the analysis says. So the analysis is pushing for c6, bishop f5, or a6. I think at the end of the day, those are probably better options out of the Scandinavian. If there's a specific knight c6 line that you know well, maybe. But here, I think this is gonna this looks risky to me with d4 being available, or d5 being available. But yeah, interesting. So c6 is what I'd go for here. But knight e2, okay. Bishop f5, I think this is good. I think good development for black in the Scandinavian is important. I mean, one of the things that people are critical of the Scandinavian opening for is you're moving your queen early, and you're moving your bishops, and you're basically getting your development later. People say don't move your queen out too early. That's, the most practical reason why that happened, or why that is the advice, is because, moving your queen out is not a developing move, and it can help your opponent develop, and then your development sort of lacks. So development becomes that much more important in a Scandinavian game, which is why I think knights. I think bishop f5, knight f6, and I guess knight c6 after e6 are all good developing moves. So this I think is being done well here. Bishop e3, bishop to b4. Bishop to g5, h6. Yeah, looking good. Bishop to d6. Okay. Yeah, I don't see any problem with, the engine saying bishop to e7. I don't see any problem with bishop to d6. Knight to b5. And here you have a cool tactic. Awesome. Let's see if you... Nice. Okay, awesome. Good work, Anch. Cool. Bishop takes at h2, king takes h2, and king to g3, and black is immediately getting the piece back and has really put white's king in a dangerous situation. Awesome, glad you found it. Good find, Anch. This is a good looking way to win. So g5, yeah, awesome. Looks like a win. Very cool. So yeah, a good short game by Anch there. Not too much. Yeah, no, a good sack. It was, if that bishop to bishop to d6 worked out great for you there. So yeah, that diagonal, putting that bishop on that diagonal paid off very quickly. This is good. Good stuff. I'm thinking everything basically made sense. The only move that I would look at is this knight c6 move. It looks dangerous. It's probably playable. Yeah. Well, you're my girlfriend, Jen, so yeah. You're the best. Thank you. I'm flattered that you're watching. There's 3 cute girls in the other room, and you're the one watching. And you're the one watching the chess stream. So what are you guys doing? Anyways, but yeah. So you made it. I can hear the laughing in the other room. By the way, Jack. But yeah. This is It's nice of you guys both, both in this apartment and out of this apartment to be watching here. Anyways, this good sack on h2 by Anch, and I think here this d6 this e6 prevented d5, but knight c6 looks risky. Might still be playable, but risky. Just facing off against this d5. I'm seeing this. Let's seeing this attacking structure. c6, knight ge2, bishop f5, knight g3, bishop g6, and then the knight develops to d7. This is something that I'm much more familiar with. It's probably a little bit safer. Anyways, I think basically, this basically is a good option for black. But if you like playing knight c6, I don't see anything immediately wrong with it. It just looks like it could be tricky to play against this d4, d5. c6 is the line here that I know significantly. I know this much better. c6, and that's a pretty standard Scandinavian line. Bishop develops, and then the knight develops, and then e6 gets played. If you want to play a more conservative Sicilian line. Scandinavian line. My bad. But yeah, so thanks, thank you very much for sending that in, Anch. I really appreciate it. It's great to have enough games to go through, and thank you very much for sending that one. Great looking sacrifice, great looking attack there. Very cool. The next and final thing that I wanted to do is Aphelion recommended. I think it was Aphelion recommended we take a look at the King's Indian defense. I'm super interested in doing that. So let's take a look at some of the King's Indian defense theory. So King's Indian defense is basically defined by d4, knight f6, c4, g6, right? Or at least on the black side, it's basically characterized that way. That's the knight f6, g6 structure is the King's Indian defense. Other ways we can go for this. I think the best way to explore this opening, which I'm super interested in, is so you play it as black. So let's take it from black's perspective. Okay, I play something similar as black, right? I play the Grunfeld. So the Grunfeld is d5 for black on the next move. So it goes knight c3, d5, or some other similar line, like there's an f3, d5 Grunfeld. There's I guess there's probably a queen to b3 Grunfeld, but there's a number of different opportunities here. But it basically transposes into the Grunfeld by playing d5 as opposed to playing bishop to g7. But let's look at the bishop to g7. King's Indian defense, normal variation, straightforward. Here, basically black has played a flank opening, and this is kind of an interesting move for black to play. Basically, it'll have some characteristics of the normal flank opening versus center pawn opening that we usually see. So, this pawn structure, e5, c5, d5, b5, is basically this is all basically controlled by white. So e4, knight f3 are two big possibilities here. e4, d6, and this is basically transposed into modern King's Indian defense. This kind of stuff. That was Caitlin, by the way, who's Katie Caruso Dobbs. So she that was one of the names that you bought a subscription for Aphelion. I'm sure she really appreciates it, and I'm really hopeful that she comes and watches on this stream. Is castles an option too? Yes, second most popular. So so d6 and castles here. This is d6 and castles are the options for black. This d6 is like a 90% move, and castles is a is the second most popular move. Let's take a look at castles. Yes, that's right. I actually think that's a great. It was really nice of you to get everyone a subscription, Aphelion. I feel like this, just since she's here and because she's my friend, and you guys don't have to, it would be super nice if you guys saw it. But yeah, you guys should go to that Sessions Live Caitlin Caruso. Jen works in the arts and on Broadway, and many of her friends are also working in the arts. And Caitlin is actively doing a singing stream right now. Just a thing if you guys are interested. It's Caitlin's my friend, so that's an opportunity to go watch her sing. But yeah, so you actually play e4 and then d6 before castles. Okay. All right, sure. So let's look at both. So castles is option number 2. I think either way it's gonna basically transpose into this, or this is the most common thing that's going to happen. They can all sing. So d6 and bishop e2, e5, castles, knight c6, d5. But overall here, basically this is going to be a position where white has a positional advantage against black. Yeah, that makes sense. I wouldn't surprise me at all. Seems like there is a good attacking position. But with many of these flank openings, it's sort of about maneuvering well in somewhat constricted position and coming up with the right time to play a move like f5. F5 here is the main line, and it's basically a determination of like when should black move forward. Okay, so you play d6. Interesting. Yeah. But anyways, I think transpositionally they're both castles and d6 are both playable. There's nothing bad that happens to black immediately if he castles. D6, say knight f3, and then castles is probably the the easiest response. Bishop e2, e5, castles, knight c6, and with that d6 move order, we're basically in exactly the same place. So yeah, this looks pretty good. Knight e7, knight e1, and overall here, I think black's in pretty good. Black's basically in pretty good shape. Is there must a castle short here? Interesting question. I mean, it's certainly an overwhelmingly popular choice. I don't know. Let's go through it. Options are bishop to g4, bishop to e2, and it seems like they're going to keep steering us towards castling short. But bishop to g4, bishop to e2, like knight df7. Yeah, honestly, I think it's probably just too protracted. It takes too long to castle queenside here. Castling is a good idea, and I think a lot of the focus in this King's Indian defense is going to be an attack of an attack on this F file. I think that F5 expansion is a pretty common general theme, and I think it's going to be tricky for black to play enough moves. Among other things, it's sort of tricky, like, do you play b6, bishop b7, knight c6, queen d7, or something? Overall, this is sort of problematic. Like, there's a lot of basically there's a lot of things that would need to be done in order to get the castling on the queen side. I think at the end of the day, it's just not quite worth it. So, yeah. Anyways, e4, d6, knight f3, castles, bishop e2, e5, and black's showing pretty well here. I don't know. E takes d4, h6, but it's a relatively equal position. Knight c6. This position seems to be a pretty common one, so let's look. Knight to d7, bishop to e3, f5, and basically black is expanding on the king side here, as is pretty common, I think, in this opening. f4, bishop f2, g5, a4, knight g6. Interesting. I mean, it's sort of tricky though, because this this kingside expansion is not going to be infinite, right? Now we're at the point where having black has gone from having a basically a material like a real big space advantage in the center, and black was very constricted, to a situation in which black is quickly expanding on the queen or on the king side. White will expand on the queen side. White still has an advantage in space on the center, but this flank expansion is a common thing in the king's Indian defense, and ultimately, I think pretty good for black as a counter. So like a5, h5, knight b5, knight f6, and overall here, this expansion is going to continue. This attack's a little bit tricky because I think it's a little bit difficult to break in here. So knight takes a7 is kind of a surprising mainline move, but okay. Bishop d7, c5, g4, c6, g3. It's interesting. This is one of those lines I'm sure that has like GMs know 36 moves in or whatever. Very bookish line very bookish line with well-established theory here. Rook a8, knight e3, h4, bishop f2. How are we gonna? Yeah, it's basically black has expanded on the king side, but how does he actually cement this into a winning attack? This looks good. But basically he's running into a kind of a wall. I don't really feel like he has enough pieces to make this a winning attack. King f7, rook h8, rook g8 would be a pretty I guess kind of straightforward way to do that. Not much subtlety in that. So that might be an option to advance this attack. But anyways, I think black's in pretty, I think black is expanding here in a thematic way, but I think white's got a better, got an advantage in this situation. I don't know. This is tricky. I want to see a win for black out of this. So let's play lines where black wins. F4. So F4, bishop F2, G5. And then let's see like knight d3. But overall, this is going to be an aggressive attack by black, expanding on the queen side and doing some, basically trying to win over there. Knight g6, c5, knight f6, rook c1, rook f7, c takes d6, c takes d6. And at this point, black's eval is pretty good. I want to pick out a game where black actually wins out of this King's Indian defense line. Knight b5, g4, queen b3, g3. Okay, this actually might work. This is a pretty dangerous. This attack is gonna leave some openings on the king side. So bishop takes g3, knight h5. Yeah, no. I mean, I believe it. I think that there are some wins. So let's play one of these to the end. How does this actually happen? This opened up the king side, and it opened up the king side with the ability to play queen h4 here. So something like bishop to h6 threatening the rook, and then bishop to e3, king h2, queen h4 is pretty tempting here for black. But let's see. Bishop h6, rook c2, bishop e3, knight f2, bishop c5, rook takes, pawn takes. And overall here, this expansion feels better. Now, I think other than this rook, which is sort of underdeveloped on a8, the queen can go to g5, the rook can go to g7, threats on this g2 pawn. There's an immediate threat if, okay, so on knight d3, queen g5, knight f3 becomes, or knight h3 becomes a pretty aggressive tactical threat. Bishop takes, pawn takes, queen takes. And, yeah, this is interesting. How How's black going to get that final rook involved? Is my question. And he does. He gets it. He gets it to defend this f4 pawn. Queen h4. Awesome. Win. Win for black. Cool. So yeah, let's see. Really interesting stuff. Okay. D6, knight f3. But I think basically this points to something pretty clear in this King's Indian defense. King's Indian defense I don't know super well relative to Grunfeld. But it does look like it provides black some attacking opportunities to be played on white's kingside post-castling. F5 is a really big expanding move and very much main line here. And I guess it depends. This is interesting. I mean, it sort of depends on how well black can, effectively attack the king side. All the main lines here. Yeah, no, for sure. D6 before castles, followed by E5 or C5. Yeah, I mean that's what happens here, and I think this is just fine. I think if they play E4, they'll follow with E5, attacking the knight. Okay, so okay, they follow with E5 here. Interesting. So you castle and they play. Do they play E5 immediately here? Okay. I mean, it's interesting. Interesting thing. No, thank you very much for participating, because we can really know what to look at. E5 here. Okay. Interesting. Okay, if you, because it looks like there's still some lines here even after E5 D6. But okay, so if you play E6 and you castle immediately, got it. Okay, so here you're saying castles, then E5. Okay. Interesting. I mean, yeah, this does look pretty restricting, right? I definitely understand. Yeah, and then knight e8, by the way, is the pretty much black's only move here, I think, right? And then f4. Yeah, so white gets a huge spatial advantage. Well, I mean, just by the way, Hyperion, the main line is d6. So it transposes a lot between d6 and castles. A lot of those both get played. So. But I can't. But d6 is completely fine there. It's the main line in this situation. Here, this is 80,000 games. Castles also playable is 7,500 games. But overall here, this basically is good for black. Castles, knight c6, d5, knight e7. And yes, but let's look at that e5 line, because e5 is still playable here, or playable-ish, against this d6. Here castles, e5, knight e8. Bad development for black. This analysis is not super favorable to that, and I think especially after like f4, black, white is running the risk of becoming overextended. So like a good push, like maybe d6 here or c5 here. I think those are the ways that you kind of undermine this this overextended center. Yeah. So d6, pawn takes d5 maybe. Could be a way to play it. 6, d takes e5, it takes. I mean, yeah, but it is dangerous. This engine line is not playing the most aggressive moves for white. Aggressive moves for white include like, say castles here, e5, knight e8, and then like probably like h4, g4, h5. That looks pretty dangerous. How do we undermine that? Like, knight e8, f4. d6, h4, d takes, c5. It looks like what they're pointing you towards here, when white builds up this big queenside. Hey, thanks, Aphelion. Cool. Let me check that out right now. Awesome. Would you like to take a look at that? You sent a game that we're gonna look at for sure tomorrow morning, Aphelion. E4, E5, F4, Knight C6, Knight F3, F5. So we're going through that one for sure. You want to add that Nakamura game to tomorrow afternoon? Well, I do. So we'll add it to tomorrow afternoon. That Nakamura game. That'll be interesting to look at. I'm curious. It's a good. It'll be a good demonstration of continuation. Yeah, no, that's slated for tomorrow morning, Aphelion. So thank you for the idea. No, tomorrow morning for sure. And I'll buy you a beer if I ever meet you in person. Because thank you very much for getting the subs for everybody. I'm sure that's really appreciated. Thanks. Anyways, this King's Indian attack, we can demonstrate on that. We can demonstrate with that Nakamura game. Main thematic concepts here are going to be expanding with f5 and attacking the white king side. This is after black castles, with f5 as sort of a leading move. Bishop g7, d6, knight f3, castles, and basically here e5. Black's in good shape, ready to expand on f5. But I want to look just for a few more minutes. But we've established the thematic concepts of the opening, which at the end of the day I think are the most important in terms of determining how to play it. Castle kingside, wait for white to expand in the center, and then be ready with f5 to aggressively attack black's kingside. We'll have that instructive game tomorrow where Nakamura, I'm sure, gets some awesome win, and we'll see exactly how execution can be maximized. But King's Indian defense in general, white gets the center spatial advantage, and then black gets a kingside spatial advantage post castling. And with great execution, black can break open white's kingside. The center is going to be pretty closed in general, so that increases black's chances of coming up with a winning attack. And then I just want to close on looking a little bit more at this line that you mentioned, castles over d6. Yeah, no, it is interesting. I mean, black. Black plays a very aggressive kingside attack out of the queen pawn opening, and that's, I don't know. I guess that does happen, but I don't feel like that's super common. But this opening is basically built for that. So that's interesting. Something cool to think about. Yeah, no, it's like a modern. It sort of has some modern characteristics where white's pawn structure gets overextended, especially if like f4 is played. Then moves like d6, c5. Threatening the centralized white pawn structure is pretty good. Interesting. Yeah, no, I think white's expansion is vulnerable, and you capitalize on that either by undermining the center if it's really too quick, or later if the position closes, attacking on the king side. Yeah, right. I mean, well, this is a very clearly Alekine's defense structure for white. Yeah. Okay. Cool. We'll add it to the list. Maybe on Wednesday morning, we can do a Grunfeld defense. Grunfeld I know of a lot better, to be completely honest. Grunfeld I know well, so we should be able to get pretty far on the theory there. But yeah, so how do so the question is, how do you refer, in the situation which it sounds like you're not super interested in, but if you are to castle kingside and then face opening structure here. Knight e8, f4, d6, and then basically let white expand and then aggressively undermine it with d6 and c5. Here, knight f3, pawn takes, knight takes, and then I think it's c5 on the next move. The other alternative, pawn takes, f takes e5, c5. Challenge aggressively on against the expanding opening structure here. If it gets overextended with moves like e5 and f4, that looks like black's best strategy. It does require probably some tactical, good at tactical execution in such an open position. But this pawn structure gets very mangled. So like d takes c5, this pawn structure is pretty rough for white. Anyways, I seem to be going over, and this is a super nice, super good analysis. It was super nice of you to contribute those subscriptions, Felion. Thank you so much for helping with all of that and supporting the stream. It means a lot to me, and I really hope it encourages everybody who's subscribed to come to come by and join us and contribute material to the stream in the future. I really appreciate having all of you guys here, even the ones watching in the other room. I really hope you guys have a good night. And thanks a lot, Aphelion. It's really nice. And I appreciate all the games you send and all the all the interest in the stream. It means a lot to me personally. But yeah, thank you all very much for being here. Have a good night. And the next stream is at 10 a.m. tomorrow morning. Look forward to seeing you there. Have a good one. Good night. Bye.